Hello everyone, and welcome back to another figure review. Today, we're taking a look at the reissue of the S.H.Figuarts Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan Trunks, the boy from the future. If you're not familiar, this originally released back in 2023, and it was probably the most polarizing release of last year, hell, maybe of all time, due to the fact that it was one of the most requested 3.0 figures that wound up being plagued by quality control issues. So in today's video, we're going to be examining what all has been fixed, as well as doing an in-depth review. For those of you that just want to see what all has been changed and skip the rest of the review, the timestamp will be in the description. Otherwise, grab your favorite snack and beverage, and let's take a look at Trunks. Starting off with the packaging, we have Trunks in what is arguably his most iconic pose, with the manga-style paneling showing off Trunks in various poses, with a vibrant teal color complementing the figure itself. We can see Trunks comes default with the Super Saiyan head sculpt on, with the faceplates and sword off to the side. Here's a look at the right side of the box, showing off more of that paneling. The back of the box gives us a look at the powered down head sculpt, as well as what to expect from Trunks when posing him around. Here's a look at the other side of the box. A quick look at the top. And bottom to round off the packaging. For the paint detail on Trunks, he's going to be low on paint and high on detail. What paint or shading that is on Trunks is just enough to add that extra layer of detail that you'd otherwise miss if it wasn't there. The hair is molded in bright yellow with some shading that can be seen throughout the middle of his hair sculpt. As for the faces, the print work and detail are some of Tamashii's best, and it's honestly why I love this figure. The jacket is made of a softer plastic that's a cross between blue and violet and allows him to articulate more freely than he was able to on the 1.0 mold from years ago. In addition to that, the Capsule Corp logo is printed on and the buttons are finished in gold. The belt is a floating piece with the buckle being finished in silver and brown, with Trunks' pants being done in a solid gray color with no shading to speak of. And I'm sure by now you've noticed that's the case with the rest of the figure. Now for the sword and scabbard, there's an incredible amount of detail here. The belt is a softer blue plastic with the buckle being painted in the same manner as the belt buckle around Trunks' waist. The scabbard is a light brown plastic with some paintwork here and there to really make it pop. The sword itself is a solid piece of plastic with the wrap around the grip being done in brown and the pommel, hilt, and blade all being painted silver. Now as for what I think the reissue is missing paint detail wise, I'm not entirely sure. I for one didn't mind the fact that Trunks wasn't just covered in shading when he first came out, and I feel the same way even now. Sure, he may look a little glossy here and there, but I don't mind it. I think if the lighting is just right, the wrinkles and folds of Trunks' clothing are going to generate their own shadows. Compared to the original, he's not going to be that much different. Maybe there's a slight difference in some of the plastic that Tamashii used, but you've got to be really looking for it. Anywho, let's move on to articulation. Alright, before we get into the actual comparison between the original and the reissue of Trunks, let's talk about his articulation. As I mentioned before, Trunks is on a 3.0 system that is a vast improvement over the original 1.0 from years ago. That said, there are a lot of things that the 3.0 figure does well, and there are things that it doesn't do all that well, and we'll talk about it when we get into it. Starting with the head and working our way down, Trunks is going to be on a double ball peg. That means we can rotate this head around freely without the fear of breaking off a hinge because it had to be positioned a certain way and we just went to torquing on it a little too hard. Not here. We can get Trunks to bury his head thanks to the neck joint and the ball peg combo fairly decently. Looking up is about greater than neutral. As for the leaning side to side, beautiful. I have no complaints. I just wish that the neck joint tilted with the head to just give you a little bit more range, kind of like you see on the Super Saiyan Son Goku that recently released. Now, as far as the torso goes, Trunks is going to be able to crunch forward about that far and lean back that far. When you take the waist into consideration though, Trunks is able to lean forward pretty darn good. You do get a little bit of a gap back here, but that's not really that big of an issue. Leaning back, just as good. You do get some side-to-side movement, but mainly a lot of that's going to come from the lower waist section. You can twist the upper torso side to side, no problem, and you can rotate the waist 360, no problem as well. I'm just not going to, just for brevity's sake. Now let's talk about the arms. We're going to be on a ball and socket system that allowed Trunks to, well, rotate a full 360. The hinges also allow Trunks to T-pose greater than 180 degrees. And then lastly, we can bring those arms in for those sword holding poses, no problem. Look at that. Beautiful. And if you're curious, it's kind of ugly behind there, but you kind of get a sneak peek at what it looks like to move these joints around. It's very nice in my opinion. I like the little touch. For the bicep swivel, it rotates a full 360. We have double jointed elbows, and the ball pegs that peg into the wrists are hinges. Now, the jacket itself is segmented, as you can see here, and there's also a little cut up here where you can see the collar is not attached. I think what they did here works, and I know a lot of people did not like this when originally released, but I think it honestly helps with the posability of the figure, as other figures that have a softer chest piece like the Orange Piccolo or even the Beast Gohan have a little bit more limited range when it comes to moving around because of that softer plastic, because it's not able to, well, move because it's attached. It doesn't help with the range at all. Here, I think it works. And let's be honest, you're not going to be looking at the back of Trunks all that often, right? Some it bothers people, others like myself, I really just don't care. Now, let's talk about the legs. Trunks can kick forward about 90 degrees. Kicking back, however, is about 45 degrees. And that's because the butt cheeks are sculpted in, and you can hear it's hard plastic. Now, the Super Saiyan Son Goku that recently released, this is actually a softer piece of plastic, so you can get a little bit more range out of his backwards kicking, but this is pre-Legendary Super Saiyan Son Goku. The trade-off, though, because now we don't have a floating thigh piece, we're able to kick out 180 degrees perfectly. The legs do have a upper thigh swivel, double jointed knees, and ankle rockers to get into those more dynamic poses. The toe hinge is about 45 degrees. Tilting down is about like that. And up is a little bit more in the neutral. I do want to note, too, while we're here, this thigh joint in particular, this thigh swivel in particular, was snug on me when I first got him out of the box. I even took the other one, I have two of these, I took another reissue out of the box just to see, and it's just as snug. Be careful when trying to loosen this up, because what's happening is I'll use this as an example, as this is a representation of the ball joint that plugs into the socket. The ball joint itself was probably not lubricated all that well from factory, or it was just really snug, but it popped off of the cap that is inside the upper thigh of Trunks. So at the end of the thigh, you have a little peg that this cap goes on, and you have to take a screw, which comes with the figure. You have to take the screw and tighten it back down. What happened was I went to torquing on it, and it caused either it to strip or it caused it to break loose and loosen that joint up. So the leg was really wobbly on me until I took it apart and fixed it. After I did that, I was Gucci. Very solid. As you can see, it's very smooth. About, honestly, smoother. Look at that. You kind of little wiggle to it here. It's a lot smoother than what it was before. So just be very cautious of that. If you're worried that you're going to stress something and potentially break it, just take some hot water to it or take a hairdryer, something to help loosen that up, and then work it back and forth. You'll thank yourself later. So with that said, now we're ready to move on to the comparisons between the original and the reissue. So for those of you that jumped ahead, let's talk about the differences between the reissue and the original run of this figure from 2023. Some lucky folks reported not having issues with Trunks, but were maybe plagued by one or two quality control issues like the left arm constantly popping off or the lower half of Trunks' shirt being on backwards. A lot of people, myself included, experienced loose joints, including the dreaded leg wobble on top of those other two issues I mentioned. I've even seen Instagram reels of the figure where the legs are broken off right out of the package. The leg wobble issue alone should have been enough for me to steer away from the figure, but I had hopes that I wasn't going to be affected by these issues. Boy was I wrong. So we'll start with the first quality control issue people reported, the arm. As we can see with the original, the arm literally pops off without much effort. On the reissue, it's on there, tight. The second QC issue people reported was the lower half of Trunks' torso being on backwards. You had to rotate the waist around at 180 degrees to get the folds of his shirt to be facing out towards you like they should be. With the reissue, the ab section is facing in the right direction right out of the box. Now the third and probably most egregious quality control issue with Trunks were his hips being too loose from the factory. They are so loose that I swear if you listen closely, you can hear the Macarena playing when you give Trunks here a little jiggle. Now the issue here lies in the hip joints not having a tight enough tolerance, and for those curious, it may be hard to see, but if you look closely, you can see the root cause of Trunks' stanky leg. Tamashii has since eliminated this issue, and Trunks can finally hold the pose without the fear that the slightest movement is going to make him topple over. Some have also reported that the rubber pegs for the sword's belt are more snug this time around, but honestly, I can't tell the difference in mine compared to the original. I'm still finding to get mine to stay on when posing, but the best fix I found for that is to get Trunks into the pose you want, then put the scabbard on him. I've also found that if you swap the belts between the two scabbards, the reissued belt is a better fit and doesn't come off nearly as easily. So I'm sure y'all are wondering to yourselves, how can I tell that I have a reissue and not the original? The boxes look identical. And you're right, they are identical except for one small detail, the Tamashii Nation's quality seal of approval. The reissue is going to have a smaller symbol when compared to the original because Tamashii Nations knows that their quality has been garbage as of late. So they had to make a new seal indicating they've turned over a new leaf when it comes to quality. A case of new year, new me, if you will. Obviously I'm kidding, but besides that there is no other indication on the box that you have a reissued Trunks without inspecting the figure yourself. You might be able to tell with the ab section, but if the figure has been opened before, that can easily be fixed by somebody else. The sure way to tell is going to be on the bottom of Trunks' left boot. If you look closely, you can see 4 dots, each representing the 4 cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. A first edition will have all 4 dots. Any subsequent release or reissue will have, you guessed it, 1 less dot. For example, most of your P-Bandai event exclusives are going to be 2nd edition runs, and they too will be missing dots. See my Majin Vegeta's effect piece and the Super Saiyan 2 go on here for reference. I learned this tip from watching Steven's toy reviews, so shout out to him. With that out of the way, let's move on to some accessories. For the accessories, Trunks comes loaded to the gills with goodies. We get 2 head sculpts, an extra bang piece for the Super Saiyan hair sculpt, 6 sets of hands, and his iconic sword. For the Super Saiyan faces, we get a stern face looking off to the side, which is my favorite, a shouting face, and a teeth gritting face. Here's a quick look at what all the faceplates look like with the extra bang piece. Sadly, the base form head only comes with 1 faceplate, and it's a stern face that's identical to the one that comes default on the Super Saiyan head. Fun fact though, the base form head does have removable bangs, and you can swap the Super Saiyan faces over to the base form head if you want. Now, if a person has more than 1 Trunks, they can do some custom work to make the faces for the base form head, or, hopefully, the GT Trunks will be compatible with the base form head, and vice versa when it comes to the Super Saiyan head sculpt, since GT Trunks isn't coming with one. I do want to note that the hair is painted on the base form head. It's the same yellow plastic that they used for the Super Saiyan head. As for the hands, we get the 2 fists that come attached, 2 blast hands perfect for blasting Mecha Frieza away, 2 splayed out hands, 2 burning attack hands, and 4 hands used to hold the sword, with one set being used to hold the sword at more of an angle. Lastly, the sword and scabbard. This accessory is going to have a lot more practicality when compared to the 1.0 Trunks. Gone are the days of having to peg the scabbard into the back of Trunks and hoping it doesn't snap off in his back. Here, we have a rubber belt that has softer pegs to fit the holes without the fear of them breaking off. I mean, it probably is still a possibility if you're being a complete Neanderthal, but I'd like to think that we're a little more careful with our collectibles here. For the comparisons, I don't have a 1.0 Trunks to compare this with, because, and I'm sure like many of you, I thought this was going to be it. So, here's Trunks next to his father, the Super Saiyan Vegeta, awakening Super Saiyan blood. The legendary Super Saiyan Son Goku. The Super Saiyan 2 Son Gohan event exclusive. And Mecha Frieza. So for my closing thoughts on this reissue, I'm going to come right out and say it. It's damn near perfect. But it shouldn't have taken a reissue to get the QC issues fixed. And I'm not just saying this because I bought 3 of these things when he initially came out. I thought maybe he was going to be similar to the Super Saiyan 4 Goku and have a loose ankle joint or something to that effect, but I was not expecting the whole figure to be as bad as it was. I know, and I'm sure many of you know, the Vietnamese factory has had its fair share of issues. Jiren's arm peg snapping off whenever you use the crossed arm accessory, Bardock's wrist peg snapping off because they were too thin, and the full power of Son Goku being floppy, just to name a few. But this is what I expect from a knockoff or bootleg. My hopes are that this is the straw that finally broke the camel's back and actually got Tamashii Nations to have a heart-to-heart talk with the Vietnamese factory. Because we all know that they are capable of making bangers. Cooler, and Frieza's other forms, the legendary Super Saiyan Son Goku, and now this Trunks are all top-notch. To say Trunks is a popular character is an understatement, because I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people asking for a 3.0 Trunks in the comments section of Tamashii Nation's social media posts. Given that, I'm sure there was a lot of backlash towards Tamashii Nations for the initial release when people finally got him in hand and found out how dirty they did our boy. I'm also not going to lie, seeing Made in Vietnam has created such a stigma in the S.H.Figuarts community that I honestly don't blame people when they bring it up. It's a valid concern to have, especially when we're getting some of these one-off figures at $65 or more on Premium Bandai that probably won't see another reissue until it becomes an event exclusive. I'm sure collectors have asked themselves, do I grab it and hope to God it's not riddled with QC issues, or do I just accept the fact that I'm going to get bent over a barrel? Because I know I have. I sure as hell have. And those are the ones I leave in the box. So, with that said, should you get this reissue, even if you bought the original? Absolutely. The issues with the original have been resolved, and it's only made the figure that much better in my opinion. Just keep your eye out for the updated Tamashii Nations quality sticker, and you should be good. I guess in a way this figure lives up to his name. He is quite literally the boy from the future, here to save us from his previous QC issues. But I'm sure for some, he came just a little too late. And that is what she said. But that also brings us to the end of the review. For those of you who made it to the end, I appreciate you. And if you haven't already, kindly hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me out and keeps the channel growing. Plus, I've got other reviews up and more to come. We're also so close to 100 subscribers, I can taste it. Not sure what I'll do for the 100 sub special, but we'll have to commemorate it somehow. Anywho, I appreciate y'all stopping by. This has been Delete Reviews, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.